It starts with our parents, not because our parents are bad people, but they're perfectly imperfect. They're human, all right? And so unfortunately though, because parents are imperfect, they inadvertently communicate to us in a way that creates this toxic shame. And the way they do that is they can't communicate the difference between doing something imperfect and being imperfect. So all of us as children end up being confused, and we grow up thinking that if we made a mistake, we as a person are a mistake. And this is what creates the false self. So this is why we all become doers and not beers, all right? Because again, there's a mistake between the doing something imperfect and being imperfect. They get skewed. So our parents, when we do something, they make the being us the problem. Instead of the action the problem, we become the problem. And that's what gives birth to all of us being, I call it the Nike philosophy. Everyone's a grinder. Go, gotta go do. You have no worth unless you accomplish something, it is part of being human to do things and achieve things. But our compulsion and our obsession with being doers is a direct result of toxic shame. It is not okay to be. And look at our culture. Very few people can just sit and be. They need to have something going. I talk about this in my book, Your Journey to Success. Can you sit still for 30 seconds? No TV, no phone, no external stimulus at all. Just sit and be. I cannot tell you how many emails and private messages I get from that passage in the book of people going, I couldn't make it 30 seconds. Oh my God, I had no idea. I was so filled with trauma, fear, shame, and denial, which are the 4 stages of the worst day cycle. So that's what happens. We become doers, not beers. And Bradshaw, who to me is one of the best experts on shame, although there's certain people where it's pieces. Bradshaw did a great job of it. He describes it this way: toxic shame is a rupture of the authentic self that necessitates developing a false self. See, when our parents incorrectly correct us, and instead of correcting what we're doing, they send the message that the way we are being is bad, that creates the rupture. All of a sudden in that moment, wow, when I be me, I get in trouble, I get shamed, I get belittled. Instead of our parents communicating what you're doing is perfectly imperfect. Who you are isn't even perfect. It's just flat out imperfect. That's the rupture. In toxic shame, the self becomes an object of its own contempt. Because see, if my parents can't even love me, if they see the being of me as so faulty, we must have contempt for ourselves. Because we have to align with our parents. Our life depends on that connection. So we embody that contempt when they looked at us, when they pointed the finger, when they rolled their eyes, and shame many times is the absence. It's neglect, the fact that they didn't even notice us. That creates the contempt. Think of that, the poor child who wasn't even noticed. That's a lot of what shame is, the complete absence of care, complete neglect. Again, in toxic shame, the self becomes an object of its own contempt, an object that can't be trusted. A toxically shamed person is divided within themselves and must create a false self to cover up, to hide his or her sense of being flawed and defective. You cannot offer yourself to another person if you do not know who you really are. And as I get into kind of 5 characteristics here of the false self, you're going to see how that phrase, you cannot offer yourself to another person if you don't know who you really are. You're going to see the signs of the toxically shamed person, how important that is. A shame-based person will guard against exposing his or her inner self to others. But more significantly, they will guard against exposing themselves to themselves. This is at the heart of toxic shame. People think they know who they are, especially this is the successful, because they have used shame and self-loathing to motivate themselves so they don't feel this feeling of no worth and neglect and shame. And so they can't even see themselves accurately. It's a secret. They're hiding from themselves. They keep themselves so busy achieving, doing, they can't be. It's just too overwhelming to experience those feelings.